Because we so often miss it out. I mean, if we're going to improve what we do, we need to reflect on it. And I guess I draw a distinction between evaluation and reflection. So, I mean, to be frank, oftentimes social action groups aren't that great at either. So for instance, you know, the secular bodies are better at doing evaluation. So after, say, we do a lot of stuff around sport. So say after a basketball or a cricket session, you know, oftentimes the coaches will be parents themselves. They'll want to get off very quickly. It's hard to do even a basic evaluation of the session with volunteers. So that's really, really important to do that. Now, reflection is, I think, something that perhaps faith communities are better at, and that is stepping back and reflecting, oftentimes through the lens of our faith, about what we're doing. And that to me is, you know, crucially important, both for the service that we're delivering, but also for the volunteers and how they're developing, you know, emotionally and as leaders and spiritually as well. So that opportunity to step back and reflect, what are we doing here? What's it all about? Most of the community workers I've run against are reflective, and they would step back and reflect as well. But I think we bring a whole, or faith communities ought to be bringing a whole tradition as well. So in other words, if you go up and down the country, I'm speaking about churches here particularly, and ask people what they're doing, say in terms of work with other faith communities, they can tell you what, and they can tell you how, but if you ask them why, they struggle to articulate that. So it's connecting what we're doing with our faith. So for me, a lot of what we do in the community comes directly out of my understanding of what God is doing in Jesus Christ, and that is creating unrestricted community. You know, Jesus over and over again reached out to those considered beyond the pale, and even his healings, in addition to the physical dimension, had a really important social dimension about bringing people back into community. So our work is all about seeking to create and cultivate that community and to break down the partitions that people put up between themselves, whether that's around ethnicity or religion or gender or age, whatever it is, to start to break those down. Any division that enshrines superiority or separation, my understanding is God wants us to break those down and to create and cultivate community. Now in a Christian setting, I would call that communion. And so what I see what we're doing is a kind of an extension of what we do every Sunday morning around the altar, extending that sense of communion into our neighborhood and into the wider world. But for people won't necessarily be coming to the work with that understanding. So it's an opportunity, say our cricket coaches, our basketball coaches, or the adults working with the singing projects, to step back and reflect on what they're doing in their sessions and how that relates, in our case, to the Christian faith. But equally, you know, most of our stuff is done in a multi-faith context, and it's quite useful to step back with our partners as well to think about what is it that we're doing and how does that connect with what we understand God is seeking to do in the world. So that kind of theological reflection is going to be, you know, unique to faith communities. I think one is the pastoral care and the pastoral approach. So what I mean by that is a real care for individuals, and especially those who are most vulnerable. So again, because we run cricket and basketball and things around singing and local heritage, the contrast with other groups is quite profound there. So other groups might send a coach in, and this happens increasingly, you know, a poor community, very diverse, and so outside agencies say, oh gosh, we could get funding to work there, and they'll come in and they'll deliver their coaching session and then they'll go. Actually, the way we do the work is the session never ends at the end of the final whistle or the final ball bowled, that there'll be things to do. There may be parents to visit, children to speak to, young adults to speak to, and that, you know, care for the individual, I think is really, really important. I guess the other thing is the longevity. You know, we're doing this for a reason, not just because we enjoy it, not just because it's fun, not just because our own children are in a particular project, but because we understand this is God's will for the world, that we work together, that we work alongside, say, Muslims and Sikhs in this community to work together for the common good. And so when things are a struggle, and I think that's a point that needs making, that faith-based community work, all sort of social action, is difficult. It's challenging. It's done over the long haul. There's no easy answers. There's no quick results. It takes real determination and a commitment over time. I think that's another thing we offer, that when the going gets tough and people might otherwise drop out, their faith is one of the things that will keep them going. We want to show that by any criteria we are delivering in the community, by the most standard, accepted things. And, for our programs, it's showing how children, young people particularly, some adults as well, develop, how they develop intellectually, socially, physically. So you need to be able to show that, and also the extent to which these projects foster a greater sense of community, social cohesion, whatever you want to call that. It's ways of bringing our community together, because people do still tend to lead these parallel lives. So I think that's really important, that we have something that we can show just like any other group. But I would have said that there's also an opportunity to develop some measurement that shows particularly what faith-based groups might be bringing and what extra value, if you want to use that sort of terminology, that they're able to bring. Every neighborhood has a different social ecology, and so the measurement that you'd use here versus just down the road might be different. So creating a standard measurement is always going to be hard. And some of the language as well, all the stuff around clients, well, that's not the way we work here. If you look at our projects, the people delivering, the leaders are of this community. They're suffering the same consequences of poverty and racism and everything else that those we're helping are. And the junior coaches, as we see, and the junior leaders, as we see them come through, people who have gone through the singing project and are now peer mentors, or even or basketball players and cricket players who are now trained themselves as coaches and their coaches. It becomes a nonsense to talk about our clients. It's much more organic than that. It's gotten a bit better, but yeah, I think whether it's other agencies or local government can be sometimes suspicious, sometimes uneasy about working with faith groups, and usually that's around somehow we've got a hidden agenda that we're about proselytizing. And it relates not just to me as parish priest, but also to say the chair of mosque committees or the president of the Gurdwara or the imams. Extends to all of us. I think the way that's broken down is the quality of the work. In the end, that's what we need to be measured by. And I am always surprised at how few funders and even local officers will actually come down and see the work. We say, oh, here's where we're meeting. You're always welcome. See what's happening on the ground, and that is what creates the credibility for us as faith-based community groups. Well, that's when, again, one of the things we fall down on a lot is documenting and demonstrating and promoting the work, and that does need to be done. We need to find ways that, whether it's a glossy, annual report or whatever it is, where we can show very definitely, the quality of the work we're doing. We had a Sacred Song Fest, so we celebrated our 100-year anniversary as a church. We were 100 years old last year. So we had a big festival Eucharist and did all the religious stuff on one weekend. Then we had another weekend, we had a Queen's Park Festival. So this was a festival for the whole community, roads closed, it was absolutely brilliant. We topped it off with what we called a Sacred Song Fest. And the theme was, there is no us and them, there's only us. And it was wonderful because we had that demonstrated with different singers from all different faith communities singing in this church, sharing the songs, and at the end, joining together in this one particular song. That was just such a shining moment. And again, anyone who was here could just see how that was a profoundly, I think I would say even, healing occasion. But again, hard to convey if you weren't here.